morning, everyone, and welcome back to the Explicit Measures podcast with Tommy and Mike. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, Mike. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Just kicking in here, getting going today. Got my coffee, which is always needed today. So, been a long week. It feels like. A lot of things are happening. This is kind of our last main podcast here for a little bit. We've got a couple recordings coming, so just FYI, there's some recordings coming up. If you want to watch the episodes as soon as we record them, we would recommend you come be a member of our YouTube channel. So go check out YouTube. You can become a member, and you get the videos as soon as we record any kind of video or any future videos. You can hear the content as soon as it comes out. A little perk for our members. Also, just really quick here, I'll be in Budapest here soon. I'll be teaching an entire day on Deneb, Vega Lite, going through a whole series of educational content around using other visuals, not the standard Power BI visuals, which I think is a good thing. There's going to need to pushing the boundaries of what you can build in desktop.
So how long is that training? Is it just a single day, or how long are you going to be teaching people on Deneb?
It's a pre-con, so it'll be a full day of teaching. So we'll be teaching on Monday. So with the session, it's Data Budapest. I can't remember the name of the conference off the top of my head. I just know I'm going there. So I'll get the name here later on. But we'll be doing a full day. I think it's like a 7-hour thing with like an hour lunch in the middle there. But we do like in the morning, full day on learning how to build Deneb, understanding Vega Lite specs. We have a whole bunch of workshop pieces. You're going to be building visuals, creating stuff. And then on the afternoon, we'll be doing more of the same. Advanced features, more things you can do inside Deneb. It's such a versatile program. I really like the visual that it is. I wish it was easier to get more data into it. I wish there was a better way of like collecting galleries and items of things. But stay tuned. You never know what will come into the marketplace.
Dude, that's awesome. And not that I'm surprised there's still how unpopular Deneb is, but quick question with the Deneb. Are you finding in your reports, what percentage of your reports have Deneb visuals?
Probably a lower amount. They're more like a stylized thing for now. Depends on kind of who you work with. It does take a little bit more to set them up. They're not quite as straightforward as click a button, get a visual, and start dragging and dropping fields over. You have to do a little bit more work to get it to run correctly. But I think the intent here is this gives you full capability to stylize and do whatever you want. You get spacing between the bars. You can round the edges. There's really no limitations on what it can do. It's really I've seen some very elaborate and amazingly complex things. There's this one person who's got a Gantt chart that's incredible. That is really highly interactive and all built inside of the Deneb visual. So kind of more the idea is here, you can build these really complex, very beautiful visuals with Deneb. It gives you an experience there as well. So one thing I'll just point out here too, Tommy, Databricks has also jumped into this Vega and Vega. So Deneb is the visual that lives inside Power BI. The spec that runs, or the code that runs basically Deneb, is Vega and Vega Lite. Databricks has just made a blog post announcement on, I think it was like the 8th, talking about how they are going to incorporate a private preview around using Vega and Vega Lite directly inside their AI BI dashboards. And I fired off a couple notes here across Twitter and the social media platforms. I said, I think Microsoft's going to get a really solid competitor here with Databricks absolving or using Deneb, or not Deneb, basically Vega and Vega Lite, a spec-based visualization program to build visuals. This opens up a big world for them, and I think this actually unblocks Databricks a lot. If they do this well, this could be a substantial competitor to Microsoft because of how quickly and how more complex you can make visuals. You can start off with a simple design, but you can continue to stylize and customize it to a high degree. I think this is going to be a really interesting move here. So I think there's a wind here in the marketplace that is going to really change how visuals are going to be built here, and Microsoft better keep up.
Interesting. All right. I'm excited to see that. But Mike, what are we talking about today? I am excited for today's topic.
Well, we got our main topic today will be a new feature announcement from Tabular Editor. So we have potentially a guest come on today that we're going to unpack that with. So that'll be our new main topic for today. We'll talking more about the semantic bridge. That'll be kind of our topic for today. Tommy, let's go into some news items here. You got a news article that you found. Let's expand that.
Yeah, so this is a follow-up to Microsoft Fabric's blog about the deprecation of the default semantic model created when you create a lakehouse. That
Yep.
we were all wondering why that was a feature in the first place. But if you missed the announcement, Microsoft announced maybe last month that they were no longer creating default semantic models when you create a lake house. You'd always have that default semantic model, then you'd have to create a new one, but you'd always have the default one. So now they actually have using the Fabric API to identify and delete decoupled semantic models. And it just simply runs the script, retrieves anything that's decoupled, so meaning it's no longer in a sense that default, sees if that model's empty and then deletes that model. And skips those objects. So it's a script, but it's just, again, just one of the things Microsoft's trying to push to get everyone on board with no more default semantic models.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is something that was, I didn't really want to use the default semantic model. This was so limited in what you could do with it.
Oh, yeah.
I think Microsoft was just spinning these suckers up all over the place. And now when you create lake houses, you don't get that default semantic model anymore. You just kind of build your own semantic model directly from the lakehouse. So I think this is a great move. I don't think I was using it. It wasn't something I was recommending to clients and customers. So I really think this is the right move to get away from those default semantic models. What I will say though is the ones that you have that are already out there, they're still going to work, I believe. I just don't think they're making any new ones moving forward. And I would also argue if you're spending time building on top of the default semantic models, it's probably time for you to migrate away from them and build just standard semantic model in the service and migrate your measures or code over to that proper semantic model and not the default one.
Yeah.
Just from a safety standpoint, you don't want to have something stuck in that lakehouse or that semantic model that just doesn't exist. One of the tricks here, Tommy, did you ever use deployment pipelines with lakehouses?
Did I ever use? No, I did not.
So the reason I'm asking this question or kind of pointing this out here is one of the things I felt that was kind of interesting was when you create a lakehouse in dev and you use a deployment pipeline to move it from dev to test, the lakehouse would move, but neither the semantic model or the SQL analytics endpoint, like if you had definitions in there, those didn't migrate. It was just creating the lakehouse and you would get a brand new created default semantic model, which kind of defeated the purpose of the whole deployment pipeline in my mind, right? So again, the story here was build a lakehouse, get a default semantic model by default. Great. You have all these things. Okay, let's add a couple of measures. You add some measures to the default semantic model. And then when you deploy it to the next environment, it all disappears and you can't deploy the things you just built, which is like, I don't know why we would want to do this. So I think this makes a lot more sense now to not have that default semantic model going between environments. You can now just have the lakehouse and a separate semantic model that when you migrate to the next environment or use the deployment pipelines, you're actually going to be able to deploy the semantic model with all of its measures and things inside it. So there was a little bit of friction there as well that I didn't really like and was very hesitant to use the default stuff.
Yeah, it always seemed to have bugs when I would go to Power BI desktop to try to edit. A lot of those, like trying to reload if you're creating a measure. We've come a long way since the initial build a lakehouse and build a semantic model off of it. So thank goodness the features are available in external tools. They're available in Power BI desktop to create a semantic model, which is one of my favorite features, by the way, to create a semantic model off of Direct Lake in desktop, which is cool because it doesn't even create a file on your computer. It just saves it immediately right back. So we've come a long way.
Just also note here at the bottom of the article, I think this is always important to call out. There's a list of known limitations. So in lieu of what's changing, right, I want to make sure that users go to this article. It's in the chat window as well. Make sure you go through the known limitations. There may be something that you are doing that you may want to check those limitations because there are some things here about like import mode. There's something about default semantic models and reports with deployment pipelines. If you rebuild the semantic model, the auto rebinding between the report and the semantic model gets broken. So there's a lot of things that cause issue here that you'll need to be mindful of in working with these, again, as you move away from the default semantic models moving forward. Anyways, just check those things out as well. Those are items you want to just pay attention to. All right. With that being said, Tommy, you ready to get into our main topic today?
Dude, let's bring it on.
All right. Main topic for today will be talking about. All right, I just lost my notes. We're going to talk about the new Semantic bridge feature here, and let's bring in our. There's our caller. Hello, caller. Let's bring our caller in today. Greg, good morning. Welcome back to the podcast again. We appreciate you being here. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you. Yeah, long-time listener, fourth-time caller. I'm really excited to be here with you guys.
Fourth time's the charm. We're finally figuring this out slightly, a little bit, maybe, kind of. All right, we'll kick it out here. Greg said he had a couple questions for us to kick off the conversation today. So I'm going to punt the conversation directly over to Greg. Up to you. Ask away.
Yeah, so thanks very much. Mike, Tommy, you've both done some consulting on data in your days. You've worked with small companies, large companies. How many times, I want to ask you, have you met a company that has actually truly one data platform, a single data warehouse, a single reporting tool, one platform that's used across the organization with nothing else?
Can I follow this up with another question?
Yeah.
Does Excel count as a reporting tool?
Absolutely.
Okay, then all of them. So, very leading question here, Greg. I have never experienced any organization that doesn't have at least one reporting tool, usually two or three that are kind of out there. You're using some back-end system that's in some other, SAP, dropping things down to another data warehousing system, something different. And then you're then flipping it over to, okay, here, let you export. And now you're onto your third system, Excel or other things that are being built on in the business side as well. So I've never had a single solution around these things. We hear a lot of useful things. And now the challenge becomes, I think, Greg, even further when we look at the big three, I'm going to call them Fabric, Databricks, Snowflake. There's three large data warehousing solution systems. I mean, there's others out there. Oracle or SAP had other things going on as well. So I don't want to discredit them either, but the ones that I'm kind of focus my attention on are those systems. And when we look at those, there's companies that have a mix of all three of those, or two of them, or blending different things together. So every one of these guys are trying to say, well, we want to have this unified semantics layer, and we want to have these unified catalogs of things. There's constantly this need to let diversity happen, but also have some consolidation down to where do I discover things? So it's this. It's a double-edged sword, I guess. Tommy, to you.
To answer your question, I mean, if they only had one reporting solution, usually they don't need a consultant. And
true.
I mean, but the other part too is, dude, it's Fabric in itself too could be almost considered, and there's an argument that in Fabric it's multiple data platforms in Fabric because it could be streamlined with a warehouse or a lake house. You're just doing normal. So even if you're just using Fabric, there's a lot of different methodologies and where the data is coming from. But yeah, it's both the problem on the intake of all the different sources and then the outtake. How does each department organization, again, actually manage and look at their data?
I feel like I have an observation again, Greg. I'll be also, you do consulting as well. You know a lot about companies here as well. When I look at companies, it feels like right now, at least in the last year or two, there's been this abundance of building the platform, right? There's this, we used to have a lot of different tools. I feel like there was a lot of we can use Databricks and we can use DBT and we can use these other different tools that kind of combine things. We have Talend. We had all these different kind of programs that were doing very specific things. It feels like recently the emphasis from the market has been, look, we don't want to buy 7 different tools to do what we got to do. We're really looking to buy a singular tool or start consolidating. And there may be multiple tools, right? There's going to be some decisions being made. We're going to be a Databricks and we're going to be a Fabric shop. That's what we're going to be. And here's the team that's going to use this tool. And it's easy to draw security boundaries because this team has access and these other members do not. So sometimes tools decide on security boundaries to some degree. But what I'm finding, it feels like, is we're trying to figure out how to negotiate less tools than more. We're starting to see a consolidation of effort here. And the tools that exist are getting more monolithic. They're adding more things to them to continue to keep you in that wheelhouse longer. Doesn't mean you'll stay there forever. Again, a lot of patterns I really, really enjoy is do the data engineering with Databricks and then flip over to Fabric and use Fabric lakehouses, shortcuts, semantic models, and reporting for the security layer and the distribution layer. So it really depends on kind of what your company is doing. But I feel like there's a consolidating effort happening to some degree. Moving off-prem, we're trying to get to the cloud. We're gonna be an Azure shop. We're gonna be an AWS shop. We're gonna move many of our main data systems into something that's a bit more portable and cloud-centric. Would you agree, Greg? Do you see a similar trend right now?
Yeah, I think there's always a drive toward consolidation, whether that's whole platform migrations, just trying to get off of one thing so we have fewer total, but also even when you've got a fairly tightly organized set of data platforms or data tools, there's also the interoperability between them. And I think that's, and I'd love to hear from you guys, but I think that's one of the core challenge areas is even if you say like, we're going to use a combination of Snowflake and Fabric, or we're going to use a combination of Databricks and Fabric, or we're going to, if we've got these multiple tools, the right tool for the job, there's still the level of integration and an effort to integrate between these things. Even though you might have chosen to adopt a couple of tools as your standards, Databricks and Fabric are not one platform. They are multiple, or Snowflake and Fabric, whatever combination.
Yes.
And so there's often, even with an organization that has decided to consolidate, there's still an ongoing integration process. How do we make sure it's easy to use work from one of these layers in another layer? And I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on that as well.
There's still friction. And even at the Fabric Conference Vienna conference, there was a lot of announcements around like, hey, look, we're going to have native Snowflake integration. We're going to have Iceberg integration. We're going to have Delta, more easily using Delta. I feel like there's a lot of olive branches being brought from Snowflake over to Fabric to try and get those two systems to kind of work really well together. I'm observing a lot of, it's getting easier with Databricks, but Databricks is very forward thinking in how they like to build stuff. There's a lot of advanced Delta tables. They have this, deletion, partition pruning thing that they're doing right now. They're able to handle lots of small records quickly, but then consolidate on a schedule. Their Databricks is doing some really interesting things and being able to maintain like the Lakehouse and Parquet Delta file standards. They're the ones who created it, to their credit, right? I mean, that's their thing. But they also are a closed garden. They don't actually release the features that they're building for a series of time. Like they keep those internal to themselves, and they don't open them up and open source those until like 6 months, a year later in the time frame, letting other companies adopt those standards. So Microsoft has adopted the Delta standard and now is able to read and use Iceberg, which makes it easier to play with these two different tools. But I see a lot of fighting between Databricks messaging and Fabric messaging, more so on the Databricks side than the Fabric side. It feels like Databricks playing a little bit dirty. They're like, oh, you never want to connect your data to a semantic model in Databricks. It's going to be so slow. It's always going to fall over and go back to direct query. And like, it's super slow. Like I hear a lot of language from the Databricks side trying to accuse a lot of things. I'm like, well, I mean, you have some valid points, but you're also over exaggerating some of the points that you're talking about if you don't design your system well. So, when I think about the platforms, it's probably a little bit easier to integrate, or going to be easier to integrate with Snowflake than it will be Databricks. I really like the Unity catalog. Databricks object in the workspace still needs a little bit more love. I still can't use streaming tables or materialized views. It'd be nice to have a couple extra features that we could use inside Fabric, but with minimal effort, I can design around that. And, I can do bronze, silver, and Databricks, and I can land gold in a Lakehouse in Fabric. I mean, it's kind of like none the wiser. Databricks can write to both locations. That's what we're finding is a bit more efficient for us, is to take that last mile and just move it to Fabric and let Fabric own the rest of it. So that's my experience with the different platforms and how they're working together. Tommy, what do you feel?
Now, honestly, I'm actually wondering why you're asking this, Greg, because I'm going to agree with most everything Mike said. The implementation side of things it's hard when you have different people also from the skill point of view, where a lot of people's background is in one of the platforms. And then it's like, okay, well, we're going to try to integrate everything else. Like, does that mean we have to move everything over? Which tool or which platform are we going to spend most of our time? Because it's more than just what is best for the organization. Is you got to look at the people and where they're comfortable and what their background is too. But I'm intrigued. Why do you ask?
Well, because it's a leading question, Tommy. That's why I asked. So one of the things that we've talked about a little bit in these last couple of episodes is the semantic model, and that the semantic model is really the place where meaning is made. It's where you define business metrics of interest. It's what most reporting is based off of, or at least in the ideal, it's what most reporting is based off of, especially in the Power BI world. And, Mike, you talked a lot about some of the interoperability points. Microsoft uses the Delta table format in
Yeah,
Fabric. And
correct.
so these are the same format. You can take a Delta table and you can feasibly use it in different places, again, depending on the recency of the features in Databricks, perhaps. But if it's just a bog standard Delta table, that can go in either place. But another area that a lot of these vendors are working on, and some of the ones that you mentioned, Mike, Databricks, Snowflake, and we know Microsoft all have semantic layers.
Yes.
So Databricks has something they've launched fairly recently. They're calling it metric views. And their spec for that has gone through at least a couple of revisions publicly. Snowflake has their own semantic layer. Microsoft themselves, they have 2 full semantic layers. They have multidimensional, the original analysis services, and they have tabular, which is used throughout the Fabric and Power BI stacks. And these are areas that there is no intercompatibility. They're different formats. They represent different things, but they are all fulfilling the same basic idea of we want to have this place where we define reusable business metrics, something that we can use across different reports where we can have those metrics defined once. And so this is what we've been working on. That is the semantic bridge. That's the goal behind it, is to be able to take these things that have different formats and be able to bridge the gap between them. And so the feature that I've been working on is in MVP right now. We've actually been partnering with Advancing Analytics, where we've got both an evil mastermind and a helpful partner in Simon and Oost at Advancing Analytics. And they've been helping us. Yeah, they're really good guys. But they've been helping us as we've been building this MVP and testing it and working on some features. And what we can do right now is just a small piece of what we want to be able to do in the future. But we've built the infrastructure to go from a Databricks metric view, which is a semantic model that's defined with a YAML specification, and we can translate those directly into a tabular model in Power BI or in analysis services using Tabular Editor.
So I've done a little. One, let me call out Advancing Analytics. Amazing team. Also been really loving Simon. Right, he does all the YouTube videos. Love the things that he learns through. He does really good. Like, it's kind of like a little bit like freehand. It's kind of like, let me show you. I've got a demo that I kind of have worked out, and then I'm just going to walk you through like the Databricks side of things, what they're building, what features being released. So I just recently watched his video on metrics view, and then I did a little homework on myself around metrics views as well. I like the idea that Databricks is trying to make this a bit more human readable to some degree. But one of the things I really like about the definition of metric views at Databricks side is they're defining the metrics inside YAML. So YAML is yet another markup language, but it's actually fairly human readable, and it translates. You can translate YAML directly into JSON, which is very computer readable and useful. But there's a lot of extra syntax and language there that is not helpful for building things. So I really liked the experience of going to Databricks and seeing YAML showing up, defining what a measure is, naming the measure, putting its details inside there. So that makes a lot of sense to me of what they were trying to accomplish. So that part I like. I haven't really seen that much on the Snowflake side as to what they're doing on their semantic layers. Again, we have some interaction with Snowflake, but more of what we do is we're actually working with customers right now to migrate them off of Snowflake into Fabric because Snowflake is a bit more of a pricier option at this point. So I don't think they're the cost leaders at this point. They're a bit more expensive. So we're doing migrations off of Snowflake and kind of re-envisioning that data platform inside Fabric at this point. Tommy, what's your experience with any of these semantic layers? Have you touched anyone on Snowflake or Databricks yet?
Yeah, so we did a migration with Snowflake, and it was a pain because it also was the more of the organizational thing on people's skill sets. Again, I'm going to go back to that, but the Snowflake one is you're dealing with more heavy data engineers, and then trying to get them into Fabric is we'll just say just a little frustrating. But honestly, no, I would say that it's always a headache.
Yeah, and so we are. That's that headache is really what we're trying to address. Like I said, we're an MVP now, but what we can do is we can translate one of these existing semantic models. Again, right now we target Databricks to tabular, but we've built the infrastructure to be able to target any arbitrary semantic layer. And what we do is we map the concepts that are similar across all different semantic models. You always have a fact, which is going to contain things that you aggregate. Those things that you aggregate are measures, regardless of what the semantic layer names them. Like you could have a semantic model that calls them metrics instead of measures. The specific name isn't important. The idea that it is a reusable piece of business logic that is encapsulated with a name, that's the important thing. And we call those measures. And so we can take measures, we can take facts, we can take dimensions. And again, whether or not something is strictly in a star schema or not, there are still dimensions. There are attributes that are descriptive that you want to group or filter by, and we can take those things. And so we're able to take these concepts of a dimensional model and then map between different concrete implementations. So the metric view in Databricks is one concrete implementation of a semantic model. The semantic model in Power BI, which is the tabular engine, is another concrete implementation of a semantic model. But if you've got facts and dimensions in one, you're going to have facts and dimensions in the other. And the question is, how do we take the syntax, the concrete representation, which again, in Databricks, that's YAML. In different platforms, it can have a different serialization format or a different structure, but taking those ideas and mapping them through to a different concrete format is what we've been building.
So Greg, again, I'm going to unpack a little bit of. There's like two ideas I'm kind of like mulling over in my head here as you describe this, right?
Yeah.
And again, this is my observation of looking at the ecosystem, the scope of what's out there right now. You know, when we look at like Databricks, we have this concept like the Unity catalog, right? So everything you build, all the tables, all the schemas that you're producing gets attached to a Unity catalog, kind of by default. It just kind of is there. So this concept of the Unity catalog provides like the governance control that you want across all your data. And what Databricks, I feel like, is doing is they're coming at this from the angle of, hey, you're going to do notebooks, you're going to transform data. This Unity catalog is this monolithic, massive system where everything goes. It doesn't matter what you build. It's got to land somewhere in Unity. You could choose not to use Unity catalog, but they've made it easy enough that why not, right? Just choose it, right? So that's a little bit of a different mindset than what Microsoft has kind of come up with, which is Microsoft could have monolithic semantic models, but because Power BI basically caches or brings into memory the columnar store to make the reporting hyper fast, Microsoft has kind of decided, look, we're not going to give you like the monolithic everything semantic model, right? We're not going to give you all tables that have ever been created inside your organization, all measures that have been created. They're basically localizing down to, I would call them maybe like a data mart, right? There's these data marts that kind of exist that are a localized semantic model. It could serve a lot of people. I'm not discrediting that, but Microsoft does not have this holistic view. And so we throw things like OneLake catalog. We have things like Purview that is trying to give the organizational view of all the data that is happening across your estate. So I feel like the story here is slightly, when I look at the two stories that we're comparing here, it feels like Databricks has a more complete, all-encompassing semantic story because it could span everything in the data estate across the entire organization. Power BI to me feels like a little bit more dissected. There's more nuance to those things. And I would also argue too, I kind of like that to some degree because it gives me, semantic models per business unit, or I could have them open up to all organization semantic models. But where I struggle, I feel like, and the point I'm thinking here is my 2 points are, Databricks has taken a different approach. Power BI and Microsoft has kind of been leading the semantic layer. This whole concept of there's not really a centralized place to get everything. I feel like I'm in the Power BI realm and Fabric realm. We get close. I have glimmers of hope around like OneLake catalog of like seeing all the things. But as an admin, there's just some missing stuff. And the things that I'm missing are, where's that consolidated view of all my information? How similar are two tables that are being either imported or direct linked across all these different semantic models? Do we have repeating business logic in measures and semantic layers? We don't really get we can do it, but it's going to take a lot of effort from admins or central BI teams to really aggregate this information to start having conversations around this one.
Mm-hmm.
So let me just pause there. I said a lot of things around like the kind of maybe the two different lines of thought between what Databricks and Fabric are doing here. What do you think, Greg? Is that kind of your observation too? Did I miss something here?
I think it's partially messaging. Because if you think about it, a Fabric tenant is a catalog of everything that is in the tenant. And there are APIs to get definitions. So there's no good UI that gives you a centralized view. But you can scrape very easily using things like the Scanner API for Power BI, or just enumerating workspaces and getting the definitions of everything in there. The information is centralized. There's one set of endpoints that you would hit to get that list of everything that exists in the tenant. And the concept of everything that exists in the tenant is a catalog. Databricks has named it. They've given a name to this concept. They call it the Unity Catalog.
Yes.
And they've given you better interfaces into it from an administrator's perspective. But it's the information is there. And
maybe that's what I'm pointing at. Maybe I'm pointing at like the difference between like the different levels of friction I receive from both tools, right? To me, there's a bit less friction right now in the way that Databricks is doing it. There's a bit more friction in Power BI. And I have visions of grandeur around like, man, if I could just only get all this stuff together and like, once I have, call it the one lake catalog of all the things, like, okay, great. Now, how do I get like statistics on how much it's being used? Where's my events coming from the Scanner API, so I can see all the events coming back from who's opening and viewing and seeing stuff. So I have this vision of grandeur around taking like both the assets side with a better graph of like, here's all the things that relate together. And then conversely flipping that over and saying, okay, now that we have that, let's look at the analytics and usage and then tie those two together. Because a lot of the conversation Tommy and I beat up on the podcast is we know there's too much for a central BI team to manage everything. We have to pick and choose. There's going to be so much content created. We call this like our pyramid of content, right? There's personal reporting at the very bottom of it. There's just so much content being created. And then as you go up the pyramid, it becomes more enterprise grade and you have less content looked at by more people. And that's where I want to focus my effort. I want to focus my time and effort on the most impactful, valuable models, designs, reports with the widest audience. That decision making, right? I want to focus on those things first, and then we can come address more of the ad hoc stuff that's at the bottom of the pyramid.
Yeah, well, but I think you're touching on something from a slightly different angle. But the idea that we've got, again, every organization has multiple data repositories, multiple places where data is living. And so the question you're coming at it is admin, how do I know what's there?
Yeah,
how do I put governance on top of it? But there's also a very, I'd argue it's your strength, but this is not a stereotypical interview. So we don't need to do my weakness is my strength and my strength is my weakness. But I'd say if we look at it from a more concrete usage perspective, that's where we're coming from with the semantic bridge. It's not so much the question of how do we govern and put it and have this one view. That's a very important question, and I don't mean to sweep it under the rug. But the other side is knowing that we have these things. How do we get artifacts into the hands of end users so they can use them? Because right now, if I have a semantic model in Power BI, I can't consume that in Databricks in any meaningful way. And similarly, if I have a metric view semantic model in Databricks, I can't meaningfully consume that in Power BI or in Fabric in any meaningful way. And so the question is not just how do we know everything that exists and govern it well, but then how do we make sure that we get these tools into the hands of the users in a way that they can take advantage of them? And so that's really the angle we're coming from with the semantic bridge is
discoverability.
Not just discoverability, but usability. If you've got a report designer and they know how to build Power BI reports, and that's what your end users want to see, but you've got a data layer in Databricks and semantic models have been defined as metric views in Databricks. How do you get those business definitions? How do you get that dimensional model structure into a place where Power BI reports can be built on top of it? And that's what we're trying to answer. And the way that we do it is we give you a way to seamlessly and automatically import the entire structure of that metric view into a new semantic model. So the governance question remains very important, because now we've got two artifacts that are logically linked, but there's no
physical link, like
there's
hard
no
linking between the two. Yeah. You could update the metrics view, but that doesn't necessarily immediately reflect in the semantic model. Like you could change the the measure or something. So what is a synchronization look like to that?
And how do you do that without it being a manual effort every time? Because maybe your data engineers are doing you're doing your data engineering in Databricks, and then your data engineers are saying, here's some semantic models, here's some metric views that surface up these things in reusable ways, and they'll keep those metric views up to date. But then you've got someone who wants to consume it in Power BI. It sure would be nice to have a tool to be able to make that happen automatically, rather than a user having to go and read new definitions or do a diff of some YAML and try to understand what they need to update on the other side. And so that's really what we're tackling, is the ability to automatically take a definition from one side and convert it into a definition on the other side.
We've had a client in asking this exact question, and we've been exploring a similar thing as well for this exact reason. Because again, the data engineering team is Databricks. We're serving reports to customers and business teams with Power BI. And so we need this like easy interoperability between the two formats, or going from one format to another one. Tommy, so sorry, Tommy, you're going to say something.
No, I was going to say, I think one of the biggest issues with all the different platforms is, let's say, even with the import, right, is what happens if I'm importing and just aligning with change management. That's such an important part for me. And I know for everyone else, but I think that's something that is not always considered as, okay, yeah, we have this existing data set, we're going to get that into Fabric. Well, if they're going to make, usually it's like, well, we're making changes in one platform, and it's no longer in a sense linked over to what's happening in whether Snowflake or Databricks. All of a sudden, over time, they're going to have different definitions, and that's always a culprit of a lot of organizations' woes and frustrations. So that's such a huge part.
I want to ask some questions. Do you mind if I dig in on some of the technical details here? You're great, because I know we talked a little bit high level.
Mike, you know me.
Okay, I know you're Mr. Technical, but I want to ask some, like, in my mind, I'm trying to bridge the gap between what I know in semantic models in Power BI and what I understand around, again, my understanding of Databricks metrics views are very new. Are they still in preview, or do they just get released out of preview?
I don't believe they've GA'd yet. I haven't checked in the last couple of days, though. Okay,
so we're on the where we are is on bleeding edge of things. We're bleeding edge, like stuff is getting released. We're in public preview. Okay, so of that, so when I think about Databricks, right? Databricks is generating tables, it's loading things in, it's pulling those tables into a final view. When we talk the jump to semantic model has this concept on tables where you import direct query, and now we can do kind of interesting things where the data can stay in Databricks, but I can make a Databricks item inside Fabric that's like a shortcut to it, and then I can reference it and then go back to the table and get the information, but then pull it forward. So where does, like, in this thinking of a tool that does this, where does the information live to say, I'm going to take this table and import it, direct query it using a Databricks SQL endpoint versus a direct lake or a shortcut to the tables? So is that something that's part of the tool? Because it feels like that, when I look at the Databricks Unit Catalog, maybe you can add annotations or things there that would give some hints to your tool to tell Power BI or the translator, say, hey, look, this table is an import table. I want to import this one. Hey, this is a table that I'm going to do direct query to using this SQL endpoint or whatever. So how do you handle that part? What does that look like to you?
Yeah, so right now in the MVP, we just make everything into an import partition in the tabular model. That is a decision we made for the MVP that will just take this kind of simple path. And we point those partitions directly at the Databricks source. So you provide the metric view definition, that's a YAML file. You provide the Databricks hostname and the path to the database in Databricks, because those are not defined within the metric view YAML. In the future, though, we'll connect directly to Databricks, and you'd be able to select a metric view, and we'd be able to have that Databricks host information automatically through the UI. But right now, you provide those things, the host name and the path. You provide the YAML file itself, which is the structure of the metric view of this dimensional model on the Databricks side. And then what we do is we've built the infrastructure to migrate that structure and build tabular object model objects on that. So a metric view has a single fact table by design, and it can have then many dimension tables. They're called joins in the metric view, and it can have many dimension fields. Those dimension fields can live in any of the join tables, or they can live directly in the fact table. And then you have a bunch of measures. Those measures are little snippets of SQL that are evaluated based on the joins and the fact table in the metric view. So we've got some high-level concepts. We've got a fact table, we've got some dimension tables, we've got a bunch of dimension attributes, fields that live in dimensions, and we've got some measures. So these are all things we can represent in the semantic model, in the tabular object model on the Power BI side. And so what we do is we create a table. Right now, we name it fact for you, but in the future, this sort of thing will be a little bit more customizable. But we name it fact. We add fields for all of the measures, for anything that a measure is aggregating, we add those fields to the fact table. So if you're, say, doing a distinct count of a key in the fact table, well, that field for Power BI, that needs to exist in the fact table. So we add the correct fields, and then we add the measures on top. We add a table for all of the dimensions that were defined as joins in the metric view side. We add a relationship from the fact table to that join. We add all the appropriate fields to those dimensions, and we add partitions to each of these tables that point back to the Databricks host, and we set those as import partitions. And so then you're in Tabular Editor, and you're looking at this semantic model that has a fact table, dimensions, measures, and fields all populated. At that point, you can do anything you want. You can change those partitions from import to direct query. If you know that you've got this shortcut set up in Fabric so that the Databricks tables are visible in Fabric directly, you could very easily rewrite those partitions instead of pointing at Databricks to point at Fabric. That would be something that you would do either manually in Tabular Editor or via a C# script in Tabular Editor, or you could ask an LLM to help you at that point. You could use Semantic Link Labs if you've deployed this thing to Fabric. You could use that to programmatically change it, because what you end up with is a whole semantic model in tabular. And so that can be deployed anywhere you can deploy a tabular model, Fabric, analysis services, and so on. You can use it in Power BI Desktop because it is a tabular model, and that's what Power BI Desktop makes. So then you could load it into Power BI Desktop, and you could use it there, and you could use Power BI Desktop to edit this thing. So right now, that's the translation. You end up with you're holding a tabular model, and then you can do anything you want with it. And that's going to be in our January release. Like I said, this is an MVP. We've built a lot. We've built with a lot of forward-looking extensibility in mind. So the goal would be that you can provide instructions, probably snippets of C#, but maybe we'll put even more structure on top of it so we could give you a UI to map things in certain ways. So for example, we can't translate every instance of SQL into DAX. That's a hard problem, but we can translate basic SQL, so we can do basic aggregations, no problem. And those happen right now in the MVP. Any basic aggregation will flow through and get a DAX expression written for you. But one thing we've talked about, I don't know if we'll implement this or where we'll put it on the roadmap, but the idea of having the automatic translation take the structure, and then where we've got snippets of SQL, we could have an LLM just go after those snippets of SQL and say, hey, figure out the right DAX to write for this.
What's a DAX to write for this one? Because that was one of my questions I had here on my list here, was like, when you're writing the measures could be simple, right? Sum of this column, right? That's very straightforward. We can even it's like 100% transferable. You could just write that and it just works. You would need to add not just the column name, but you need to table column name would be the only translation we would need to go from that step. But there's other statements and other examples they were giving here, which was like, hey, there's going to be a case statement, a switch, which is basically similar to a switch. So there's all these patterns that would need to be translated between the two. And you could write just straight SQL however you would normally write it. And as you're describing this, Greg, I'm opening my mind here a little bit to the pattern I'm seeing here. As you describe this, it feels like we're building programmable SQL to some degree, right? Because in my mind, I've gone to a notebook. I said, okay, I'm going to go figure out this information. I know I'm going to count this column. I'm going to aggregate or sum this thing here. And so I have to, okay, I'm going to intentionally think about this is the column I'm aggregating by, total dollars, total units, whatever. And then I have to write the SQL to make it happen, right? So okay, do this, write the sum, okay, name the column as something else. So it's the statement of sum column as piece of information, which is the measure, right? So that's, and that's the thing I would like to reuse over and over again. And it's, the semantics layer is now saying, okay, when I just say total units, it now knows the exact same calculation to run that measure over and over again. And in the Databricks world, this is just like now SQL, right? This is not just SQL consuming that. As a quick side note, Databricks, and again, I don't know this one, you have to correct me if I'm wrong. In Databricks, you can use the metrics view in a notebook, and you can call out the measures in SQL statements, and it will know how to interpret those measures correctly back in the SQL statements in the notebook. Is that correct?
I cannot confirm that
okay.
on the Databricks side. I just don't know.
Johnny's on the call right here as well. There's a couple. Jake is also on the call in the chat window as well. Johnny or Jake, if you've used these metric views, I'm going to call you out directly. Chat, you're going to come to my rescue here, hopefully. If you have used metric views and you're using metric views in notebooks, fill in my details here, and I'll come back to your comment. So first one to chat to give me the right answer, or even the wrong answer, I'll talk about it anyway. So I don't even know if it's right or wrong. I'm going to rely on chat here, but I'm going to. Okay, so Johnny is saying yes, you can use the metrics view, but you have to wrap it in a function. Okay, I'll have to go dig into that a little bit later, and it's a static item. Okay. Interesting. Good. I'm just going to call that out there to chat to give me any other details around using metric views from Databricks in the notebooks. But going back to our point, Greg, there is some parts of this where this falls apart because we're not writing, like you're not assuming we're going to write DAX inside the metrics view. You're going to write SQL there. And so there is a translation to like, what does that SQL statement mean? How would we get an equivalent DAX statement for the same measure? Column seems pretty straightforward. Like name of column, format type. Like I'm not seeing anything in columns that are like scary to me.
Columns can also be arbitrary SQL in a metric view.
Oh, doggone it.
So
okay, so then
this is yeah. So this offers a couple of opportunities. We can either generate M code to
produce
that columns on top, and then those would be in the partition definition, or we could use M to only import the columns that are physically available in those Databricks tables.
Not SQL-esque.
And we could define a DAX calculated column to represent that.
No, don't do that, Greg. Delete
I'm
that one.
saying.
That's a bad feature. Put that in danger risk mode. Don't generate me calculated columns. Please don't do that.
So we're doing some product design right now, but we've got options.
Feature downvoted. Feature downvoted.
Yeah. But I wanted to call out something that you said, Mike, because I think it's really important, and it is really one of the core justifications for why we have a semantic layer. And you were talking about the idea of SQL to represent a measure. And if you're writing a whole SQL query yourself, you would write the expression, so the sum of a column, and then you would write as to alias that thing with a name. And so that's two pieces of information in a SQL query. The first is the expression, the logic to define this aggregation we care about. And then also the naming is directly in line in a single SQL query. And there's no structure to that other than the structure of the SQL query. So this may be a really big SQL query. It may do a lot of joins. It could have some really complex filtering logic,
subtables, inner
all
join
sorts
table,
of stuff.
Weird stuff. Yeah, things happen.
And the structure of that is one big chunk of text that is SQL source code that runs somewhere in response to a user action. And that might be the definition that is the backing for a report. Something like a paginated report, SSRS, these more traditional reporting tools where you just define a SQL query and then you throw that onto the page and render it somehow. And so the idea of a semantic model in general, not the Power BI semantic model, not tabular, not a metric view, just in general, a generic semantic model. You take this definition and instead of having it in this giant query, you have a structure where you say that we have many things that are measures. Each of these things that is a measure has a name. And each of these things that is a measure that is named has a definition. And we can pick which of these measure definitions we want. When you were doing this in SQL queries, you just had to grab one SQL query, read it, understand it. The semantic model is now in your brain. And if you want to write another query, you have to know which parts that you extract and copy paste over. And there was no structured way to do that. You would just open up a text editor that hopefully had some syntax highlighting and auto completion for you. But you would open up the text editor and write a new query that reuses the idea of the measure, but the only way to reuse it is to copy and paste it and put it into place in a query. The idea of a semantic layer is by giving structure to this, by giving a name to each measure, by giving a name to each dimension and a name to the fact, then you can pick and choose these things atomically. And that's what a tool like a Power BI visual does. You've got this menu of options, like a restaurant menu, not like a program menu. You've got this menu of options that you can select from. And you say, today I'd like the fish. I'd like the fact table, and I'd like this measure. I'd like my fish prepared in this way. I'd like this measure from the fact table. And you pull that into your reporting canvas. And because each of these things is a separate named object, it's not something embedded in a query somewhere, but it is its own entity. This measure is then something that you can reuse, and tools can automatically generate queries that include that measure. And so I don't know if that's the point you were trying to make, but it is the one that you did make, is the idea of a measure as an object on its own.
Yeah, exactly.
That was it. You nailed it.
The idea of this object on its own instead of something just embedded in a giant piece of source code.
I mean, that makes sense, though. I mean, again, I think about like the so in a much better way of describing this, the feature, that's what I was thinking, right? And to be, jokes aside here, but a little bit like this makes sense because if I'm going to make the definition of some measure, odds are I'm going to use it once or twice. Tommy will need to go into the same experience, write the same measure again and again and again. This is the whole reason why I really liked DAX and the semantic model in Power BI is because I was looking at SQL servers and writing SQL and saying, okay, well, I'm just trying to investigate the data. And what I found was much faster was let's just load the table into Power BI and I can just drag and drop columns. And behind the scenes, it knows, hey, this is a implicit measure on a column as a number. If I'm just doing data discovery, it was so much faster than writing SQL. Okay, here's a dimension. How many counts of records do I have of that? Okay, boom, click and drag, boom, boom, boom. Like I was able to write, and I had an epiphany when I was in a different consulting firm that was like, oh my gosh, all I'm doing is writing really fast SQL statements that are built on top of DAX that I can then define common calculations. And instead of having to select these columns and do the order by and all the grouping things, all that stuff is handled. And the extra syntax that SQL is powerful. And I'll also argue, I think SQL runs the world. I think the most elaborate data systems you're going to find in the world, no matter what, there's some form of SQL ripping across them. There's now, I think a shift in a little bit here where more modern systems are using like slightly different languages like Scala or things that are being interpreted down to a different layer. But at the end of the day, I think almost all companies have SQL stuff laying around. It runs the world. It's not going away.
It's SQL and Excel, baby, all the way down.
Yeah. Yes, agreed.
Whether you want it or not.
Yes, totally agree. Okay, this is really interesting. Wow, there's a lot to unpack here. Okay, so last maybe question I have here around unpacking this idea a little bit. One of the things that I really like about semantic models is the ability for us to add annotations to something. So if I'm building something custom, if I'm building special things, I know that SQL BI does this a lot. SQL BI does a ton of adding annotations to, hey, this is my date table. This was made by SQL BI's Bravo tool. Inside there, it adds an annotation to that table or objects in the table say, hey, this is my date column that I'm going to be using. And what SQL BI does is they reference these common tables with a very common name. And that way, when they're building measures or having automation of measures, they can say, oh, I'm just going to go look for annotations that have the things that I need and then go use those pieces of data from the model. Does the YAML spec that Databricks provides, does it allow us to have the ability to have like custom YAML in there? For example, a measure might need to have an annotation on top of it, whatever we would want to add, or do you know, or are you aware, again, also asking chat here as well, is the YAML definition extremely rigid when you're working with Databricks and you can't add additional properties that it just holds on to for the sake of holding on to them?
It has a I don't remember the name of the property. It's either comment or annotation, I think. But there is a property in the 1.1 version of the metric view specification that allows you to include this additional sort of information. There are also, confusingly, comments that you can inline in YAML.
That's also what I saw. Yeah.
Yes, and those are, because they are YAML, they are comments in the YAML syntax.
Yes.
They're not comments on the metric view objects.
Yes.
Those things,
confusing.
Yes. So you could include that, but they would mean nothing because any YAML deserializer, which is what you do first, you deserialize it so that you have an object model. Yes. You won't have those comments anymore because they are YAML comments. They are comments in the syntax of YAML. And so you would need a deserializer that is aware of those things and captures them and feeds them through as some additional property. So you can put them in there, and they will certainly be helpful for the maintainers of a metric view who are writing literal YAML, but they aren't useful really to anyone trying to consume a metric view because they are opaque in any object model of a metric view because they are not properties. They are comments. So I don't remember if the I don't remember if the formal property is called comment. Yeah.
So I'm looking at this one. So you can do comments in the YAML to like save what you're doing in the YAML. And then there's comments in the metric that you would then save back to the metrics that gives you a comment about what it is. And I don't see, in my opinion, when I look at semantic models, there's a really rich layer of metadata that goes behind the scenes that automation tools can use. And that's to me where I see annotations coming from. An annotation is a key value pair, annotation value answer, right? Value or key, and then the response to that, right? That makes a lot of sense because now I can then at mass add a lot of extra automation data to these metric things as well. So there's, I do like the fact that they have, synonyms. That seems to be very corresponding to what we have inside Power BI, semantic models. Do like this comment feature, but it doesn't really fit or scratch the need that I feel like I have, which is I need metrics views in Databricks to contain the ability for me to add an annotation, which is just a series of key value pairs that I can then pick up later on and like use more programmatically. It feels a bit clunky right now that it's not going to be formulated as smoothly as I would like. So I'm going to have to go build an array inside a comment that will have my key value pairs attached to them, and have it all and have it hopefully having the YAML parse correctly on things. So to me, that's one area where I'd like to see Databricks improve that a bit more, is like this ability of like, it doesn't have to be called an annotation, but I'm going to need the ability to add custom pairing of data elements on top of these measures, so I know a little bit more how to handle them, especially there's a usability side of this that's like the user side, but then there's like the automation side, and that's what I'm looking for. I need a little more support on the automation side for the Databricks metrics views.
Yeah, and we will, for several of the things that we've talked about that we'd like to implement for the semantic bridge, we will probably be taking a lot of advantage of annotations in the tabular object model to be able to capture things like what was the specific metric view object this came from, and what was the original SQL definition of this thing.
Yes.
That would be very useful information to have in such a translation pipeline. And we will have this, we didn't really talk about implementation, but the way we go about this is we've actually defined an abstract dimensional model that is an intermediate representation, which is the target for all translation through the semantic bridge. And that will also be very rich with annotations and being able to flow this sort of information through. Some of this is currently implemented but not used, so barely implemented. Some of it is still in to-dos and backlog items, but we would like to be able to support very rich translation flows between more than just metric views and tabular models. And so we've talked a lot about Databricks and tabular because, well, that's what we've implemented in the MVP, but it is just an MVP. We expect to have a lot richer functionality going forward, and that's largely going to be driven by needs of our end users and of our customers. But there is a lot of information about the information. There's a lot of metadata about the structure of a semantic model and about about how it's being used, about where it's coming from. And we want to be able to preserve as much of that as possible to aid in automated processing of these things as we're translating them and building pipelines like this.
So if I had to just quickly call out, again, we've been talking a lot about Databricks because that's kind of what we know. Again, most of my customers are on Databricks, and the ones that I have that are on Snowflake are kind of debating whether or not we're going to stay with them or not. What is, just as a quick question, what is the equivalent metrics view thing for Snowflake? What do they call theirs? Is it just called Semantic? I'm looking here. I'm trying to Google them real quick here. They just call it
I dropped a link in our show notes, and I have actually forgotten what the Snowflake name is. DBT also has a semantic layer.
Semantic model spec, Cortex analysis, semantic model specifications. Okay.
So these exist. It seems like a lot of platforms are realizing what Microsoft knew back in the late 90s and early 2000s. That semantic layers are valuable, and it's about more than just writing a giant SQL query that does the right things and quickly.
Yes.
And
I want to double down on that point exactly because I like the fact that Microsoft made this decision a long time ago. The semantic layer was what they started with. And so we're now seeing other tools in the last year starting to come out with the semantic modeling. Databricks, I mean, Power BI has been doing this since I've been around in it since 10 years now. And even before that, there was some of this back in Power Query and Excel, but beyond that. So, I mean, you could probably already go back to like earlier than 2015 of when this stuff was existing. Analysis services is a lot of this information as well. So love the conversation. Super exciting. Greg, thank you for announcing this first here on the podcast. We really appreciate your announcement around the semantic bridge. I'm excited to see where this project goes. One more feather in the cap of Tabular Editor, again, changing the market, leading the way, and be very innovative on like stuff we didn't even know we needed to have. And all of a sudden, boom, we now know we need this new semantic bridge between different data systems and making things easier for us to create artifacts that are Power BI semantic models, which is exciting. Awesome. Very exciting there as well. Tommy, any final thoughts?
Honestly, I love all the updates. Tabular Editor is when I did restart my PC over the weekend because issue.
The first install?
It's one of the first installs. And me and my macros go a long way, baby. So, but no, I love seeing this and looking forward to with Tabular Editor also to the AI features that are coming out. I have heard about that as well. So there's a link. So
that one's not mine to talk about as much, but that's also going to be in our January release. So it won't quite be a Christmas present, but some things to look forward to in the new year.
Awesome. Very exciting. It's hard getting things out at the end of the year because everyone kind of takes a little bit more time off around the holidays and things. So it's difficult to release Christmas presents for things. Microsoft themselves, Power BI team is going to take a very big break. We don't get any features in January. So having some excitement in January from Tabular Editor will be very encouraging. So looking forward to that as well. All right. For those of you who want to play around with metric views, look at the notes on this video itself and on the description, all the links that Greg provided. There's some things about DBT semantic modeling. There's some things around Snowflake and data modeling. There's 3 links around metric views and Databricks, multidimensional modeling from Microsoft, analysis services, dimensional modeling, and other articles as well. Check out the video description of this video. You'll be able to see all the details, additional learning materials as well. Greg, thank you very much for your time on talking about developer experience tools. I think I've learned a lot. Again, as always, whenever we bring on people that are way smarter than I am on the show, I continually am flabbergasted at how little I actually know and need to do more. I feel like there's not enough time in my day to continue pushing all these new cool experiences and ideas. It's a lot of. I honestly think we're in a very exciting time right now between AI, agentic things, tooling, big data systems. I mean, there's a lot of really interesting developments happening that I think we can stay busy with for many, many more years. That being said, thank you all for joining and participating with the podcast. We're going to just kind of wrap it here. If you want to become a member, check out our membership down below. Any recorded videos that are coming up here over the holiday break here and traveling that Tommy and I are doing, you'll be able to catch those as soon as they come out. So we'd love it if you become a member. That being said, Tommy, where else can you find the podcast?
You can find us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. Make sure to subscribe and leave a rating. It helps out a ton. Do you have a question, idea, or topic that you want us to talk about in a future episode? Head over to Power BI Tips/podcast, leave your name and a great question. And finally, join us live every Tuesday and Thursday, 7:30 a.m. Central on all Power BI Tips social media channels.
Thank you all so much, and we'll see you next time.